This is part 2 of our audio tour of the Frank Lloyd Wright designed Marin Civic Center. You should be standing in front of the model of the Civic Center. Here again is your guide, Avery Goldman.
We are now at the model on the first floor of the Civic Center. This model was built under Mr. Wright's direction at Taliesin East in 1958 and modified by them in 1961 or 1962 because changes had been made to the original plans. In 1956, in order to consolidate 13 scattered offices at one location, the Marin County Board of Supervisors purchased this land, at the time 140-acre working dairy farm in the northern edge of San Rafael, for $551,000. It's important to understand a little bit about the features of the land. The road parallel to where you're standing represents Highway 101. The area where the hills are was solid land. The green area was marshland, and the lagoon was there, but not as large as it is in this model, and there was, and there is, no river, as is shown in this model. Let me introduce the three people most responsible for this building. Pictures on the wall opposite you. On top, of course, is Frank Lloyd Wright. Below him is Vera Schultz. Vera Schultz was the first female supervisor in Marin County, and by that time, the most educated to have ever been a supervisor. And below her is Erin Green. Erin Green was an architect trained by Mr. Wright at Taliesin, who after graduation moved to the Bay Area, lived in Marin, and had an architectural office in San Francisco, which he opened in 1951. After that, he became Frank Lloyd Wright's representative on the West Coast, so that all Frank Lloyd Wright projects on the West Coast went through Erin Green's office. In addition to that, Erin was the associate architect on this project. Erin Green was instrumental in completing some of the plans for this building. Led by Vera Schultz, Frank Lloyd Wright was contacted and expressed interest in doing the project. But the word was that he, quote, didn't compete. As one would imagine, an architect being hired for a project of this magnitude would come before the selection committee with sketches and present ideas as to what he had in mind for the project. Mr. Wright wasn't going to do that. He said, interview whoever you want, and if you'd like me to do it, give me a buzz. And they did, and he came out in July of 1957 to sign the contract. It was his 770th and last. He was 90 years old at the time. The day after signing the contract, he came to see the land for the first time. He was in a Jeep with Vera Schultz, Erin Green, and a driver, and directed the Jeep to the top of the South Hill, which is to your right, as you're standing looking at the model. He got out of the Jeep and surveyed the land. In his eye, what he saw are three circular hills, and beyond it, the circular curves of the lagoon. Circle, the predominant shape of the landscape. Mr. Wright frequently used geometric shapes as the theme of his buildings. Here it was the circle. At the Hanna House on the Stanford campus, it's the hexagon. In the Berger House, also Marin County, it's parallelogram. And beyond the circular shape, he saw the straw-colored grass in the hills, which was gold in the setting sun, the golden hills of California, what the Chamber of Commerce likes to sell to our visitors. He thought the site was beautiful. He said it's as beautiful as California can have. According to Erin Green, Mr. Wright was standing looking at the site, and after 20 minutes, he threw up his arms, and he said, I know exactly what I will do with this site. I will bridge the hills with graceful arches and build the buildings upon the arches, which of course is what he did. The most important feature of Frank Lloyd Wright's architecture is what Mr. Wright called organic architecture. In practice, that meant that you don't level the hills and you don't fill the marshland, as the other architects had suggested, but you incorporate the beauty of nature into the structure itself. Look at the building from eye level and notice how beautifully the contours of the building follow the natural topography of the site. The rooftops connect the tops of the hills. The arches reflect the round topography of the site. The buff color walls reflect the earth. And Mr. Wright specified gold for the roof to match the golden hills of California that he saw. Parenthetically, they could not find a gold finish to hold up to the weathering. It turned ugly brown, so they changed it to blue. Blue matched the sky, and also Mr. Wright had completed a Greek Orthodox church for a suburb of Milwaukee a few years earlier, which had a dome which was finished in blue tiles. This is a similar shade blue. Construction was in two phases. The first phase, from the South Hill through the dome, is the administration building. It was started in February 1960 and completed in 1962. It's 580 feet long. The second phase, the courtroom section, or the Hall of Justice, is from the dome through the North Hill, 880 feet long. Notice then, it's a long horizontal shape, almost 1,500 feet. Mr. Wright said horizontal is, quote, the natural shape of human endeavor, and he railed against what he referred to as excessive verticality. The long horizontal shape is punctuated by a 172-foot vertical gold anodized aluminum spire, which acts as a break in the horizontal shape and also like an exclamation mark. Mr. Wright also designed the entire master plan. And this is important because in it he expresses his idea of what a civic center should be. He thought it should be literally a civic center, an extension of the idea of an ancient Greek or Roman agora. It was to be a meeting place, a marketplace, not just a place for government buildings. And that philosophy is illustrated in this model, much of which was not built. The entry arch that you see on your right was not built. The elliptical building next to it is a U.S. Post Office, the first building completed. Further to your left, the Horseshoe Building was to be a senior center, which was not built. The Amphitheater was an interesting concept. It was to be a 3,000-seat outdoor year-round amphitheater with a round stage for theater, musical performances, boxing matches, wrestling matches, and there was a large pool area behind it. In the 1950s, Marin County had a well-known water ballet company, and that pool area was for the water ballet. None of that was built. He really did not understand the weather in Marin. He thought he was in sunny California. Nobody could sit there in the sun in 95-degree heat for 3 hours to watch a performance. Well, they really wouldn't have to. The performers wouldn't last that long. So in the summer, it wasn't very useful. In the winter, when it's cold, wet, rainy, windy, also nobody would sit there. So because of that, it wasn't built. The lagoon was there, as I mentioned, and there is no river, but there is a depression in the earth that leads from the lagoon all the way to San Francisco Bay, which is roughly half a mile away. At high tide, there's water in it. In low tide, it's dry. Mr. Wright's concept was to dredge out that creek, if you will, and make it into a small river, so boats would have direct access from San Francisco Bay to the Civic Center. That oblong building next to the bridge was to be a restaurant, and next to it a marina for the boats to dock. None of that was built. The round area by the buildings was originally specified for the round Veterans Memorial Auditorium. As construction progressed on the rest of the buildings, it was evident there was not enough parking to support the auditorium, and the estimated cost was way over budget. So instead of putting it there, it was moved to the north side of the lot and redesigned by William Wesley Peters. So the auditorium is not a Frank Lloyd Wright building. Before we leave the model area, look back towards the main entrance. This is considered Frank Lloyd Wright's signature mall space. The corridors are cantilevered, so they seem to float in space. And the corridors narrow as you rise, so that the mall space widens, and your eye is drawn from a garden, literally in the center of the building, up through this space all the way to the sky. Very dramatic. The segments of the corridors end in a rounded area. And it gives the illusion of continuous circular space, very much the same feeling as the Guggenheim in New York. Now, for those who haven't seen the Guggenheim is indeed continuous circular space. It's a ramp covering 6 stories, but you get that same circular feeling. In a typical Frank Lloyd Wright contract, he would design, or more accurately, people under his direction, supervision, and with him signing off, design virtually everything, including, in this building, the garden, the signs, the art, and so forth. The circle theme that I mentioned is carried throughout the entire building, both the interior and the exterior. From here you can see the circles in the garden. The door handles form a circle. The original water fountain near the entrance is recessed in the wall. It's circular. The top is a half circle, variation of the circle. The signs are half circles, all part of Frank Lloyd Wright's circular theme. They also specify the specific plants. The interesting thing to me is that these leaf-like plants are clivia. Some people pronounce it clivia. Most of them are the originals from 1962. They never get any taller. They have beautiful orange blossoms, which bloom most of the year, off and on, since it's like a greenhouse. They grow by sprouts. The gardeners cut the sprouts to keep them in the right shape.
And it constantly amazes me how beautiful the plants are at the Civic Center. Well, we hope you've enjoyed your tour of the Marin Civic Center with Avery Goldman. Thank you very much for being part of it. I'm Jerry Kay.